There are places in video games that were built for thousands of people, and now you walk through them alone. No objectives, no dialogue, just the sound of your footsteps and a world that already moved on. Most video games don't really want you to feel alone. They fill the maps with icons, quests and NPCs, and anything to keep your mind busy, anything to remind you that you matter. But there's something eerie about the games that don't, especially the ones made years ago. Ones that went from millions of players to just a tormented few too attached to let go of their now empty worlds. Some of these places are ambitious and beautiful, and others are strange, even uncomfortable. So walk with me as we explore some of the loneliest places in video games. Not all emptiness is the same. Some worlds feel empty because they were abandoned. Others were never meant to be full in the first place. Shadow of the Colossus doesn't introduce its world. It doesn't explain it. It doesn't welcome you. You are just placed here to explore through the endless ruins and an almost lifeless landscape that somehow feels like eons older than the player roaming it. There are no towns here, no crowds, and no signs of life that feel current. Come to think about it, this world in particular feels a bit more exhausted than it is empty, as if it has already seen the story play out with a different hero carrying a different name. The space isn't there to challenge you, it's only there to remind you of how small you are. And there, moving slowly in the distance, are the Colossi, massive forms that dwarf everything around them. Not enemies and not characters, just beings that belong in the world in a way you never could. They are massive, yes, but in this world size doesn't demand awe. This isn't a place built for awe, it's built for exploration, for weight of scale and a solitude that hits you before anything else happens. And that's why Shadow of the Colossus feels unforgettable, because emptiness here isn't a flaw, it's a canvas on which the story, the world and the Colossi themselves can exist. You can watch them from a distance or even move alongside them and they won't care. In my eyes, they are as much a part of this landscape as the mountains and the rivers or the ruins. So we can conclude that this world, unlike what it seems at first glance, isn't about just conquering giants. It's actually about exploring a world that existed beyond your grasp, observing it, experiencing it, and realizing that even its largest inhabitants are just a piece of its long and quiet history. And just as Shadow of the Colossus reminds us that the world continues beyond our presence, some games take a different approach yet deliver the same exact lesson. And I'm talking about worlds that were built for gamers by gamers. Spaces that were once filled by interaction and activity, yet now feel strangely quiet. Every now and then a single avatar passes by, a wave in a short chat, or a building rising in the distance, just tiny sparks of life against the calm. As I walk through these empty worlds, I try to imagine what thoughts the gamers who built them were having. To give you some context, Active World came out in the mid-90s, a time where the internet was just becoming a place to meet, explore and create together. And thousands of people could inhabit a single server, building cities, landscapes and social spaces filled with whatever captured their imagination at the time. Like whatever this is, a slightly unsettling statue that seems to follow me around the park. I don't know, maybe pre-2000s stalking was still socially acceptable. In my travel through Active Worlds, I can honestly say I didn't just connect emotionally with gamers from the past. I even learned a thing or two from them, even now. Because every once in a while, you stumble onto something completely unexpected and genuinely brilliant. A prime example of that is my visit to a world I didn't understand at first, and an encounter with a portrait of a person I didn't know at all. But there was the name on the sign, and I had to Google this one actually, and then I realized who I was looking at. Frank Lloyd Wright, one of the most influential architects of the 20th century, someone whose work wasn't about spectacle, but about harmony between structure and nature, between space and silence. The world around this portrait suddenly made sense. This wasn't a random design, it was Falling Water, one of Mr. Wright's most beautiful works, a mansion built in the heart of nature, with glaringly similar features to the real thing, recreated here, inside Active Worlds, by someone who admired it enough to rebuild it from memory, or maybe reference or pure obsession, I don't know. And standing here, alone, decades after it was built, I realized something I hadn't expected. I wasn't just exploring an empty game world anymore. I was walking through someone else's curiosity, their influencers, and ultimately their decision to preserve something they cared about, even inside a place most people would never visit. I wandered through what looked like a church, a digital replica of a real one that still exists in San Francisco. I clicked a piano that played small happy notes, a planetarium with animated models of the solar system, a record shop where I stumbled onto one of my new favorite records, Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando and Dawn. This track was familiar and I think I might have heard it somewhere, but it wasn't really something that I kept in memory, knew the title, or even think I ever heard the entire music piece before. I went on a roller coaster, looping through blocky green palace towers, a strange world where fish fly, and a massive blocky statue of Mario watches over it all. But the moment that stayed with me the most wasn't the spectacle. It was an old family home, with a photograph on the wall of two women, maybe mother and daughter, and an older man standing beside them. A nursery upstairs with a toddler in one cradle and another in a prom, frozen in time to never grow up and never become adults to experience the suffering of this world. I also realized that I could click on individual blocks, and this is to see when they were placed. And one of them was placed in March the 18th, on the year of 1999. And that was before I was born. I was standing here inside a space built by someone who existed online before I even came to this world. Their moment of creation and choice to place that block was still here, and there it hit me. The internet doesn't forget the way people do. It preserves moments, without context, without endings, without feelings. It keeps rooms intact long after people who built them stopped logging in, or even breathing, I guess. And games were never really designed to do this. They weren't meant to become memorials. But give players enough freedom and enough time, and they start preserving things unintentionally. And I guess maybe that's part of human nature. And then there are games that do the exact opposite. Games that don't remember anyone. Games that don't preserve history and don't care if you were ever there at all. No Man's Sky is one of those worlds, not exhausted or abandoned, just vast. A universe built by mathematics instead of memory. Every planet, every moon, every star system is generated by an algorithm that doesn't know your name. You land on a world that has never been walked on before, and likely never will be again. There are no ruins telling you what was lost, no homes waiting for their owners to return, no evidence that anyone ever mattered here. Just color, scale, and silence. And unlike Active Worlds, where every structure carries intention, everything in No Man's Sky exists without meaning, until you give it one. Or so I thought at first. You name creatures that will never be spoken of again, and you scan planets that will never be remembered. Even the bases that you built on countless planets won't miss you when you leave. And that's the difference. Shadow of the Colossus makes you feel small in the world that remembers itself. Active Worlds reminds us of the people who are gone, but No Man's Sky asks a quieter, colder question. What does it mean to exist in a universe that doesn't remember anything at all? But let me give you some context first. No Man's Sky is a science fiction exploration game that was released in 2016. It generates an entire universe procedurally. And there are over 18 quintillion planets, each with their own terrain, creatures, and ecosystem. There is no main path, no handcrafted map guiding you forward. You are just given a ship, a few tools, and pointed towards the stars. The game was designed around exploration, survival, and discovery. As I mine the resources I need to repair my ship and jump from one system to another, slowly moving towards the center of the galaxy, I begin to question a lot of things. One of the most disturbing ideas to me is that out there are some planets and creatures that would never be explored. In fact, if I spent all my time exploring planets at a wrist-breaking pace, I would never be able to be even close to going through them all, even if I played the game my entire life. Now let's be generous. Let's say 8 billion people, basically every human alive, all of them decided to play No Man's Sky. Let's say each person explores a new planet every hour. No distractions, no breaks, just pure exploration. That's 8 billion planets per hour, right? Over an entire year, that comes out to roughly 17 trillion planets explored. It sounds impressive, but compared to the full universe of No Man's Sky, that's less than 1/millionth of a 1%. 1/millionth! Even if humanity kept going year after year, century after century, No Man's Sky universe would barely notice. Most planets would remain untouched, unscanned, and unnamed. Entire ecosystems would exist without ever being observed, not because we failed, but simply because the scale was never meant to be conquered. That's when the loneliness changes. It's no longer about being alone on a planet. It's about realizing that exploration itself has a limit, not because the universe is small, but because we are. There's an old question philosophers like to ask. If a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, No Man's Sky quietly asks a different version of the question. If a planet exists, if a creature evolves, and if entire ecosystems live and die and no one ever sees it, does it really matter? Does it really exist? When you scan a creature in No Man's Sky, or give it a name, and even knowing that no one else may read it, you're doing something very human. You're acknowledging existence. Not for rewards or recognition, but because you're witnessing something, even briefly, and that gives it weight. That gives it meaning. The universe doesn't change when you name that planet or creature that you scanned. It doesn't become safer, it doesn't become permanent, but you change. Because in a universe that doesn't remember anything, the act of naming becomes an act of defiance. Maybe that's why these lonely places stay with us. Not because they're empty, but because they give us space. Different kinds of loneliness, different kinds of silence. But they all point to the same truth, that meaning in games, like meaning in life, isn't always given. Sometimes, it's something you bring with you. It's in the way you walk through the empty space, in the curiosity that makes you stop and look, in the decision to name something, even when no one else is listening. And maybe that's why these lonely places stay with us. And maybe that's what makes these places unforgettable. If you made it so far, you probably are still looking for the punchline in what I'm saying. But either way, you're a legend. Thank you so much, and I love you for making it through to the end. And if you like our content, then please consider subscribing and help us a little with the algorithm. This has been the Gaming Sensei, and see you in the next time.